You're listening to the Options Insider Radio Network, the home of the Options Podcast. For more quality options programs, visit theoptionsinsider.com or search for Options Insider Radio Network in your podcast provider of choice. Listeners can also access all of our programming through our mobile app available in the iTunes and Google Play stores. Select programs are also available via live stream at mixlr.com/options-insider. That's mixlr.com/options-insider. Don't forget to follow along with your favorite programs and submit your own questions for the hosts at twitter.com/options, stocktwits.com/options, facebook.com/theoptionsinsider, or via questions at theoptionsinsider.com. Bitcoin, Ether, Ripple, Litecoin, and more. Cryptocurrencies and other digital assets are taking the financial world by storm. This exploding market provides everything a savvy trader needs: volatility, volume, and liquidity. Provided you know how to find it. That's where we come in. Welcome to the Crypto Rundown. Each week, we'll break down the latest trading activity, trends, and developments on everything from coins to tokens, futures, and even OTC options. If it's moving the crypto markets, then you'll find it on the Crypto Rundown. Now it's time to dive into the exploding world of cryptocurrencies and digital assets. It's time for the Crypto Rundown.
All right, everybody, that music means it is time once again for the Crypto Rundown, the program where we break down everything going on the other side of the fence, the crypto side of the fence. We're going to talk the options, of course, the spot, the futures, the volume, the volatility, the SKEW, all that good stuff, and a whole bunch more. My name is Mark Longo from theoptionsinsider.com, as well as, of course, from the old Options Insider Radio Network. Now, a lot of people who tune into this show may not be regular options traders, may not know much about our network. So if you haven't done so already, make sure, A, you subscribe to the full network. You're getting a couple of shows a day out here that you're missing if you're just picking up the Crypto Rundown. And then B, if you like what you hear, leave those reviews on your platform of choice so new folks, particularly those folks out there in the crypto space, can continue to discover this program. We're pretty much the only folks out there really talking about the derivative side of the crypto fence, which is a huge, untapped, and indeed unexplored marketplace. So if you like what you hear, keep those reviews coming so new folks can continue to discover the show. As we dive right on into it, it is time for the Bitcoin Breakdown.
It's time to explore the latest trading activity, trends, and developments across the world's leading crypto market. It's time for the Bitcoin Breakdown.
All right, everybody, welcome to the Bitcoin Breakdown, the portion of the show where we break down what the heck is going on in the world's largest crypto asset, aka Bitcoin, the big dog itself. And oh, what a week it's been. Oh, what a time it is to be alive out there in pretty much any market. In the broad equity markets today, they're all seeing a huge rally out there, of course, hot on the heels of what we think is an outcome in the U.S. election, even though nothing is official yet. And of course, a big shot in the arm today from the big news out of Pfizer that they have a vaccine for COVID that is apparently 90% effective, which is a very, very high efficacy rate for a vaccine. So the market's liking that. And of course, over the past week, we have seen folks liking themselves a little bit of Bitcoin as well. Bitcoin rallying hard. If you listen to our election night special, you know we were talking about how it blew past 14,000 out there throughout the course of the week, got north of 15,000, got up to around 16,000 or so out there. Just huge moves out there in the Bitcoin realm over the course just the past week. Just in our last show, it seems like an eternity ago now, but it was 13,600 at the end of our last show. And coming into today's show, it has given back some of the upside, not quite threatening that 16,000 strike anymore out there, but still pretty firmly in the green. It was about 15,300 and change coming into showtime today, which puts it up almost 1,700 handles, 1,699 from this time last week. Of course, a lot of you out there who've been watching the technicals on Bitcoin. We've had quite a few technical folks on this program, but a lot of people have been looking at this level. Of course, the key level was 2019's peak, which is right around 13,880, which we last saw back on June of 2019. Of course, blowing through that, obviously, and beyond. So some folks looking at that as perhaps a sign that that has paved the way for new levels out there in all things Bitcoin. We'll get to all of that. Let's start parsing what's going on in our neck of the woods. The vol, the volume, the open interest, all that good stuff. A lot of this data coming at you courtesy of our friends over there in SKEW land, SKEW.com. Check them out. Also check out the Genesis Volatility folks over there. They've been on the show a few times. They do a great newsletter. If you want a great synopsis of what's been going on in the world of all things crypto volatility and options and volume and SKEW in between episodes of this show, check out that newsletter out there. Coming into showtime now, we're seeing that realized volatility, the 30-day realized. So we're looking back now, 30 days, at what's been going on over the past 30 days from a vol perspective in Bitcoin. As you might imagine, that's up. And it is up quite a bit. It was down to almost 38% on our show last week. So that had come in pretty substantially. Now it's back up pretty strong, about 56% coming into the start of the show out there. So realized vol looking pretty juicy. And depending how you break it down, the folks at Genesis over there like to look at their volatility cones as well. And depending on your frame of reference, remember, realized vol could be 10-day. We picked 30-day here. It could be 20-day. Could be 100-day. Could be 1 year. Wherever your frame of reference is. Depending on your frame of reference, you could see realized vol now exceeding the 75th percentile out there in some segments and some frame of reference. So that's an interesting time when realized vol is perhaps getting up there over implied vol. That usually doesn't happen in a lot of the more traditional options markets. You very rarely see realized volatility in, let's say, Apple options, for example, exceeding the implied. And when it does, it usually means something's up. The game is afoot out there. You may want to pay attention. And so it's lurking that way and looking that way in some quadrants of realized vol out there in Bitcoin right now. So probably worth paying attention. The side of that coin, of course, is the implied volatility. That's, of course, looking ahead 30 days to see what the market is predicting for future volatility out there. And that actually, we saw a spike as Bitcoin rallied because we saw, as the underlying moves, people always think of volatility as solely to the downside. But movement translates to volatility at the end of the day, to the upside and to the downside. And so we saw that sharp spike in Bitcoin. Obviously, that's going to translate into a pretty strong increase. Now we've seen Bitcoin retreat a little bit from those highs, and we've seen the implied vol retreat as well. In fact, coming into showtime, that 30-day implied volatility was almost exactly unchanged as to what it was this time last week at about a 58%. So that shows you how much movement we've had intra-week only to settle out net on the week at exactly the same level of implied volatility. Now, I said it before, almost 60%. That's a pretty high level of volatility for a major asset class. You have to look pretty far to find other major assets that trade at that level. Now, these days, some have. I mean, crude oil just hit that not too long ago, but it gave it up pretty quickly. It's hard to maintain a 60% and even higher level of volatility for a large trading asset out there, and yet Bitcoin has managed to do it for some time. So the old joke out there that Bitcoin is a volatile asset. You go watch shows like Silicon Valley. That was a running theme on that show for a while out there. Well, it has some volatility, and it has managed to maintain it out there, which is always pretty interesting. Let's look at the SKEW now, comparing that 25 delta put to that 25 delta call. If you have no idea what I'm talking about, that sounds like Greek to you, go check out some of our educational programs like Options Bootcamp and Options Playbook Radio on our network. That'll help you understand it a little bit more. That SKEW has ticked down a little bit. As you might imagine, there were some wild swings there intra-week as we saw Bitcoin just moving all over the place out there. It's down about negative 9.3%. It's down from about minus 8% on our show last week. But of course, we saw big moves in implied volatility throughout the week as well. So that, of course, is going to play and wreak havoc a little bit with the SKEW out there. The folks over there at Genesis Vol, they term the SKEW as kind of even right now, which is kind of a similar bid to the puts and the calls. They look at it differently. They look at it as kind of a near-term tranche of kind of the shorter-dated options and then the longer-term tranche of longer-dated options out there. So they look at the near-term SKEW, 35 days, is about close to even, whereas longer-term, they said it before on the show, and it still is kind of biased to the calls, and it's kind of hard to argue now, particularly with those ridiculous prints we saw in the January 36,000 calls last week. Let's get on out to the open interest. Not surprisingly, the OI is looking pretty strong out there in crypto options across the board. Last show we had DERIBIT at, looks like around $2.5 billion or so. In terms of OI, they're of course still the number one venue out there. They cracked over $3 billion here this week, at least the total aggregate venues combined did. And DERIBIT hit about $2.8 billion by themselves. It's come off a little bit now, as you've seen some of that recent fury of activity settle in a little bit, but still across all of the major venues. So you got DERIBIT, you got your BAKKT for whatever they contribute, which right now is zero. You got your CME, LedgerX, OKEX, Bit.com, and Huobi all mixed in there. All of those coming together right now are still a little bit north of $3 billion combined in OI. So that's very strong out there, and that's certainly the highest we've seen in quite some time. DERIBIT, its max recently was, like I said, $2.8 billion. They're at about $2.5 billion right now. So they're all pretty much at or threatening their highs out there right now. CME, one of the lone downside ones, is off about $100 million worth of notional from where it was, and its high. Its high was $389 million. Right now it's exactly $289 million. So a little bit less out there in CME. Let's see how that breaks down from a percentage perspective. DERIBIT still the big dog, 78% of that OI. CME still number two, but coming off a little bit. It was at 15% at one point. Now it's down to about 9%. And then we got Bit.com coming on strong with 6% out there of the overall. Let's see, that's at about $283 million right now, and it's maxed out at $212 million. So Bit.com making a pretty strong resurgence out there in terms of Bitcoin options OI. OKEX number 4 at 4%. And they got LedgerX falling off a little bit too, down to 2%. And then BAKKT, of course, as we know, still at 0. Still waiting to hear what's going on over there in BAKKT options. Let's look at the volume in a little bit more light out here. The big day since last show was November 5th. That was a huge volume day on all the platforms, including DERIBIT. DERIBIT hit 751, so $750 million worth of notional paper going up on DERIBIT. Now, you know I hate quoting notional, but that's kind of just the lingua franca of the crypto options world right now, so you kind of have to go with it. But still, that's a huge amount. That compares to some other recent highs we've seen. $553 million on the 30th of October, $459 million on October 21st. So DERIBIT, clearly, that's the highest they've seen. $751 million in, I think, ever out there. So just a huge day for LedgerX, or I should say for DERIBIT. Big days for other ones as well. Let's look at some maxes really quickly on the other venues. OKEX did about $41 million back on the 5th, so a pretty active day for them. BAKKT.com, though, again, just taking the driver's seat. $85 million worth of notional going up there. CME doing about $19 million. CME's kind of been lagging behind a little bit on the options front of late, and we'll be doing a whopping $1.2 million. In terms of some of those big prints that were going up there on the 5th, we saw big prints on the 16,000 calls in March, going up 529.8 times on the 5th. That was back when Bitcoin was $15,268. They went up for 0.1563. That's an implied vol of 66%, if you're curious. At the same time, exactly the same time, you also saw the June 18,000s. So perhaps a roll from March out to June. That could certainly be. I don't have sides on these, but they went up the exact same size at the exact same time. Also 529.8 of the June 18,000 calls going up. Again, exact same level of Bitcoin, 15,268. These went up for 0.1708. So if you're wondering, you can price that out for your fractional Bitcoin for yourselves. A little bit higher vol in June, 68% versus 66% for March. So if that was a roll, interesting strikes. Of course, we hit that 16,000 strike, so I guess you can't really fault them for getting spooked if they were maybe short the 16,000 strike and rolling it on out. Either way, that was kind of one of the bigger prints of the week. Also worth noting, 450 of the Nove 14,000 calls also went up that same day a little bit earlier. So a lot of big prints going up out there on the 5th. Those are just a couple of the ones that kind of caught our eye. Today, not so much. Almost 1,000 of the Nove 16,000 calls, which are, again, formerly at the money, now a little bit out of the money calls going up today, but not a hugely active day out there in DERIBIT today. Let's look how it breaks down across the month, see where the action is. We said it before, we'll say it again. Crypto options, they love a quarterly, and that's pretty much the case again right now. DECE surging into the driver's seat now with about 44,000 contracts open out there. But Nove is holding its own. Nove doing pretty well as well with about 42,600 contracts open in Nove. So they're kind of neck and neck right now, but it seems like DECE is going to surge on ahead. Also worth noting, March, 29,600. And, of course, Jan. Can't forget Jan with those absurd 16,000 contracts worth of those Jan 36,000 calls. That has catapulted Jan into one of the top positions now with 25,600 total out there. Also, some weeklies in Nova are open as well. So if you add up all of the Nova expirations, actually Nova is number one because there's about 28,700 going away end of this week on the 13th, and we've got about 10,300 expiring on the 20th of November. So you add all those up together, you got about 38,000, and then you got another 42,000. So you got about 80,000 contracts total across all the expirations in November. So that puts Nova in number one, but we will see, I'm sure, Dees fight its way out there. In terms of what strike has the most OI out there, I bet you can probably guess. We talked about it last week. It was an absurd trade then. It remains an absurd trade, and it remains open. Yeah, it's still those 36,000 calls in January. That's kind of obscuring everything else out there. Those are still number one with a bullet. 19,200 contracts open on that strike. Still today, coming into showtime. That means number two, it's kind of a bit of a horse race between the 16,000 strike with 14,200 and the 14,000 strike with 14,000 pretty much even. So that's pretty much 1 and 2 right there. Then we drop down a little bit to, not that much though, 13,700 open on the 20,000 strike. So normal times, that would have seemed pretty aggressive, optimistic, indeed outlandish. But now, like I said, that 36,000 strike has just obscured everything else out there. So we got 16,000 followed by the 14,000, followed closely by the 20,000 strike. Then everything else is down around 11,000 contracts, including the 12,000 strike with about 11,500, the 13,000 strike with 11,300, and the 18,000 strike also with 11,300. So again, bias to the upside and to the pretty far upside right now with the 36,000 strike in the lead. Going on out to Bitcoin options on CME, not a heck of a lot printing out there. If you guys want to see it for yourselves, you know where to go. CMEgroup.com/TWIFO, TWIFO, or /TWIO, TWIO. Both of those effectively stand for This Week in Options or This Week in Futures Options. It's a program we do every Thursday with the CME folks and FTSE Russell, and we generate great reports that are available for free for you guys all week long. So if you want to go over there, just select from the drop down the cryptocurrency tab, and you can see exactly for yourself what's printing. Not a lot on the tape. I did it right before showtime. About 30-odd contracts on the tape so far. But again, the week's just getting started out there. A decent week last week. I think we saw a couple of hundred contracts on the tape. But again, not the slew of paper we've seen on some of the other venues out there. Not the case on the futures, though. The futures have been strong, including today. The futures, almost 13,000 contracts on the tape coming into showtime just today. Last week, not as much paper. Every other day was about 10,600 or less. So for whatever reason, the future is kind of a bit of a lagging indicator out there of late. They tend to have volume resurgences a couple of days after the big moves you see on some of the other platforms out there. So I'm not sure what's driving that out there, but the future is doing pretty strong paper today. Not so much the case out there in BAKKT land. Yet again, the BAKKT volume bot chiming in to say their volume was about 6,300 contracts. Remember, that's a 1-to-1 contract as opposed to the 5-to-1 contract over there on CME land. So that's decent. That's actually up 68%. So that's a pretty good clip for BAKKT on the futures front, though it's still about a third of their all-time high of about 18,000 and change, which they set back in September. So decent paper on the futures front and BAKKT, but unfortunately no paper on the options front. But now it's time for us to keep on rolling into the number 2 options market and beyond. It is time to go into the altcoin universe.
It's time to move beyond Bitcoin and find out what's moving the rest of the crypto marketplace. It's time to boldly venture into the altcoin universe.
All right, everybody, welcome to the altcoin universe, the portion of the show where we break down everything going on the rest of the crypto assets outside of the big dog Bitcoin, except for right here, where we break down the top 10. You know the deal. Standard caveats apply with these valuations. Take them with a bit of a grain of salt. Number 10 in the top 10 this week, Cardano, almost 3.3 billion. Number 9, Polkadot, 3.7 billion. Number 8, Litecoin, kind of hanging out in that same spot for a while there, Litecoin, 3.9 billion. Number 7, Binance Coin, pretty much 4 billion even. Number 6, Bitcoin Cash, 4.9 billion. Number 5, Chainlink, 4.9 billion as well, just a little bit north of Bitcoin Cash. Number 4, XRP, 11.3 billion. Numero trace there, Tether, still hanging out there. Number 3, 17 and about a quarter billion. Number 2, you know what it is. It's ETH at about 50 billion, I should say, almost even, 50.5 billion out there. And the number 1 with the bullet, Bitcoin, feeling the surge, 284 billion out there, and it got obviously much higher over the course of the week as it was surging towards that 16,000 level out there. Let's go out to the number 2 options market, number 2 overall crypto market as well. We're talking ETH. It was a good week for the ETH folks out there as well. Last week, it ended right around 385 towards the end of our show. Coming into showtime today was at 445. Puts it up, about 60 handles from this time last week. So a good run for ETH. Let's go out to the vol side, see what's cooking out there. Let's go back first 30 days to see the realized vol. That's ticked up quite a bit, as you might imagine. It was 50% on our last show, and coming into today's show is about 64%. Of course, intra-week, it got even higher out there. 30-day implied, now going out 30 days to see what the market is pricing in. Unlike Bitcoin, which kind of ended the week unched, this is still up about 69%. It was 59% on our show last week. So it ticked up about 10 points net on the week. So they're pricing in a lot of juice, 70% vol pretty much. That's a pretty volatile asset. That's kind of interesting, about roughly a 10-point premium in terms of vol from ETH to Bitcoin out there. So that's kind of interesting. Maybe some trading opportunities between the two. Speaking of trading out there, some decent paper on the tape this week out there in ETH land. 69 million worth of notional going up on the 6th. So interestingly enough, Bitcoin, or I should say ETH, had its big day the day after Bitcoin on the 6th. We saw all the records for volume on Bitcoin options on the 5th. ETH saw them the next day on the 6th with about 69, almost 70 million worth of notional on the 6th, 57 million on the 7th a day later. That compares pretty favorably to some of the recent highs we saw out there, including 42 million with a notional on the 30th and 39 million on our show day last time, and of course about 52 million back on the 21st of October. So hitting some new highs out there with about 69 million just on the 6th there. In Deribit land, OI, same story as we saw in Bitcoin, back above kind of its recent levels out there in terms of all things OI. North of the $500 million level, about 550 odd million. Deribit alone is at about 517 million out there. So that's pretty much at its max. Then you got OKX with about 42 million and Huobi at about 1.7 million. So yeah, between Deribit and OKX, you're pretty much at 550 million out there alone. So that's a pretty impressive OI, and it's only been surging upwards over the course of the past month or two. So interesting volume out there in ETH land. We'll keep an eye on that as we move on out to another name you guys like to watch. Again, it's not really at a price level that merits a lot of options activity, but maybe we'll get there one of these days. That's, of course, Ripple. Had a pretty decent week out here, ending the show last week at about 23.5 cents. Now coming into Showtime today was at about 25 cents. Seemed like there's some rumors that maybe they might jump ship from the U.S. and head on out. I'm not sure if it was Dubai or somewhere else out there, but they were looking at setting up headquarters somewhere outside of the U.S. for obvious reasons. I think the overall regulatory environment here in the U.S. still a little bit murky, and maybe they just don't want to deal with that anymore. I think it might have been somewhere, I think in the Middle East was where they're looking to make their new headquarters out there. So that obviously, folks liking that. And of course, the rising tide lifts all boats out there in crypto as well. So you're going to see a little bit of upside net in XRP. And you got about 1.5 cents out there. So you not have to worry about it threatening the 20-cent level anymore, at least for the near future out there. Bitcoin Cash, Bitcoin SV, both following a similar trajectory, though not quite as aggressive as you might expect. Bitcoin Cash up about $6.50 from our last show. Bitcoin SV almost unched, up about 85 cents. So not at all feeling the love week on week that we saw in some of the other major crypto products out there. And now it's time to see what kind of love you guys have. It is time for your crypto questions.
You've got questions about crypto. Who doesn't? It's time to find out the answers to your crypto questions.
All right, everybody. Welcome to your questions. We got a lot of them out here. Let's see if we can squeeze a couple in before we wrap up this kind of quick hits, just the facts, ma'am, episode of the Crypto Rundown. We'll be back again, of course, in the coming weeks with more great guests in the crypto hot seat and everything else you guys have come to expect from this program. In the meantime, Tells wants to know, what the heck is up with those 36,000 calls in Bitcoin? Yeah, that was a popular discussion point on the show last week there, Tells. If you missed it, I encourage you listeners to go back and check out last week's show. We broke down, effectively, I think it was about 16,000. I think a few more have piled in now because there's about 19,000 open in Jan right now. So, of course, there's other strikes open as well, but a good chunk of that is those 36,000 calls. That's just a huge print. 16,000 of anything in the crypto option space is enormous. Well, yet alone that so near term, it's January. And we're used to seeing some outlandish upside bets, but they go out pretty far in crypto. 50,000 strike in a couple of years, that sort of thing. Those are kind of par for the course in the crypto space. They make some headlines every now and then. But this is extremely near term. This is January. This is only a few months away. So this guy needs Bitcoin to more than double by January expiration for these to pay off. Now, obviously, if there's another sharp gap up, there is a Vega component to these options, so that he'll feel some profits. He'll see some nice movement. It doesn't have to get all the way there. And a lot of people like to focus on the expiration graph and like the P&L graph as their profit and loss for how these positions work. And technically that is the case. But if we see a sharp gap up north of 20,000 in the next couple of weeks, something like that, that would obviously be very impressive. And he would certainly be feeling pretty good in these calls. He could take them off and probably make a pretty hefty profit for it. So it doesn't have to be straight there by Jan expiration. He's got a little bit more to play with out there. But still, it is an interesting and a very, very aggressive play there, Mr. or Mrs. Tells. And we're going to keep an eye on those. We'll see if they close them out, maybe take some off if we keep seeing these rallies. He probably could have taken them off for a decent level back when we were threatening that 16,000 strike not too long ago. That was a nice little pop-up there. Of course, the other problem with that is he put on so much that he is effectively the entire open interest on that strike, and indeed in that month. That's never an enviable position to have on. That means you're all the paper. You have to pretty much trade with yourself to take it off, or you have to find someone else to take the other side. And good luck if you want to sell those at a 2x or 3x increase, finding the other side for that. That's going to be a little bit hard. So that's one of those positions where you're probably going to have to wear it for a while to find a level to take them off or find another counterparty to take them off. So that's what makes it challenging. But just from an overall outlook perspective, if it does gap up a little bit in the near term, he could probably take at least some of them off and maybe pay for a good chunk of his position. But yeah, those are crazy. We're going to keep an eye on those. From a size perspective, from a strike perspective, no matter how you parse them, those are pretty outlandish out there. All right, Throws has a comment he wanted to share with us. Throws says, happy anniversary to Bitcoin. Hard to believe it's been only 12 years. Yes, you are correct. We just passed the 12-year anniversary. It was back on October 31st of 2008. So Halloween. Maybe an auspicious, maybe an inauspicious day, I guess, depending on your viewpoint on Bitcoin. Folks who think it's a scam probably think that day has a little bit of a joke to it. But either way, that's when that infamous paper from Satoshi, who's yet to be, of course, identified all these years later, put it out there. He dubbed this new system, he called it Bitcoin, a peer-to-peer electronic cash system. That was the title of it. It was only a 9-page paper. I think for all the tumult that has ensued as a result, you think it would be this epic treatise. It was only 9 pages, and people have debated it pretty much ever since, and here we are doing a show, talking about all the impacts that's going on in the wake of it. So you're right there, Throws. I like the handle too, Throws. Yeah, you're right. It has been 12 years, and where would we be without it? There would be no show like this, that's for sure. And certainly not anything of this marketplace to really talk. Maybe some of the other ones would have popped up, perhaps on their own, but still, Bitcoin was the big dog, kind of got the ball rolling. It still is the big dog out there. So you're right. Happy anniversary to Bitcoin out there. And coming up actually on 2 years on this show, which is kind of hard to believe as well. In January, it will be 2 years. So happy anniversary to all of you forthcoming out there for tuning in, for listening, and for making this show such a joy to do week in and week out. Unfortunately, that music means we've come to the end of another Just the Facts, Ma'am edition of the Crypto Rundown. Somehow these Just the Facts episodes still run 30 minutes. There's so much to parse in the crypto world these days. Remember, if you want more in between episodes of this show, you know what to do. Go to your platform of choice, wherever you listen to this, and then subscribe to our full network. We got shows pretty much hitting you twice a day. Every day throughout the week, you get all sorts of options, analysis, volatility, all the stuff we talk about here in a lot more detail. SKEW, open interest, volume, volatility, all that good stuff and a lot more. There's a lot popping off in these markets, as you might imagine, these days. We'll help explain it to you, walk you off the ledge, give you a little bit more information to arm you for your trading day. So wherever you listen to this, make sure, if you just listen to the Crypto Rundown, upgrade to the full network. And if you like what you hear, keep those reviews coming. Keep those questions coming, too. We do love to hear from you guys. And we'll see you back here throughout the week with all the content hitting the network. And then back again on Monday with another episode of the Crypto Rundown.
You're listening to the Options Insider Radio Network, the home of the Options Podcast. For more quality options programs, visit theoptionsinsider.com or search for Options Insider Radio Network in your podcast provider of choice. Listeners can also access all of our programming through our mobile app available in the iTunes and Google Play stores. Select programs are also available via live stream at mixlr.com/options-insider. That's mixlr.com/options-insider. Don't forget to follow along with your favorite programs and submit your own questions for the hosts at twitter.com/options, stocktwits.com/options, facebook.com/theoptionsinsider, or via questions@theoptionsinsider.com.